The wind smelled like dust and things left too long in the sun. Delilah Ames stood on the porch of a cabin that was one good storm away from giving up. One hand rested on her swollen belly. The other shielded her eyes. Behind her, 4-year-old Lily had her arms wrapped around her little brother, Levy. He was a quiet boy. Too quiet. They hadn't eaten since yesterday. Her dress was a map of sweat and dirt. The man who'd left them here, she refused to give him a name, had promised he'd be back with help. That was 5 days ago. The baby kicked, a hard, impatient thing, and that's when she heard it. Hoofbeats, slow, steady. A single rider appeared over the rise, tall in the saddle. He wore the road like a second skin, coated in a fine layer of dust. A wide-brimmed hat hid his eyes, but his back was straight as a fence post. He saw her and pulled his horse to a stop. Delilah stepped off the porch, her bare feet sinking into the hot dirt. "We don't want trouble," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. The man swung down from his horse. He held up both his hands, slow and easy. "Ma'am, I don't mean any trouble. You just look like you could use some help." His voice was low, scraped raw by the road, but there was something kind in it. He was maybe 30, with skin tanned the color of worn leather and a square jaw. His eyes were a clear, startling green. She hesitated. But then Levy let out a weak, dry cough from the porch behind her, and the dam inside her broke. "We're out of water," she said, the words tumbling out. "The well's dry. There's no food left." He just nodded once. "Name's Montgomery James. Folks call me Monty." He gestured back the way he came. "Passed through Rockwood an hour ago. Got some supplies." Delilah felt a breath leave her chest she didn't even know she'd been holding. Monty moved slow, like he was calming a spooked horse. He unstrapped his saddlebags and pulled out a canteen, a strip of jerky, and a loaf of bread wrapped in cloth. He set them on the porch steps. "How far along are you?" he asked. 8 months, she said, looking at the bread, not at him. "Where's your husband?" She flinched, a tiny, sharp movement. "Not here. Not coming back." Monty's jaw tightened, just for a second, but all he did was nod. "Then I'll stay a while, help get you back on your feet." Delilah's head snapped up. "You don't even know me." He met her gaze, and his green eyes were steady as the horizon. "You got 2 hungry kids and a baby on the way. That's enough for me." She didn't know what to say to that. Nobody had said anything like that to her in a long, long time. So she just watched as this stranger, this Montgomery James, started fixing a life that wasn't his. Monty stayed, not because she asked. Delilah had forgotten how to ask for anything. He stayed because he seemed to think it was what a man was supposed to do. He hauled water from a creek a mile away without a word of complaint. He patched the leaky roof with shingles he fashioned from a fallen oak. He even taught Lily how to braid scraps of cloth into a thick, sturdy rope. He never once asked about the baby's father again. It was like the man had never existed. Monty slept in the barn on a bed of hay, but every morning he was on the porch tipping his hat to her, like she was a lady, like she was someone worth respecting. Every evening he'd sit with Levy, whittling a piece of wood into the shape of a horse or a bird, his large hands surprisingly gentle. He worked quiet, he talked plain, and he never looked at her swollen belly like it was a mark of shame. Delilah started watching him when he wasn't looking. The way he spoke low to his horse, a soft murmur she couldn't quite hear. The way he always, without thinking, seemed to step between her and the road any time a wagon passed, like he was a shield. He wasn't loud. He wasn't grand. He was just there. He just stayed. One afternoon, Lily was chasing a lizard and tumbled right off the porch. She skinned her knee on a sharp rock and she screamed like the world was ending. Before Delilah could even move, Monty had scooped her up. He held her in his arms, his big thumb wiping the dirt away so gently. "Hurts," Lily sobbed into his shoulder. "I know, little one," he murmured, his voice a low rumble. "But you're tougher than you look." He kissed the top of her head. Delilah had to turn away, her throat suddenly tight. No man had ever been that kind to her daughter, not even the man who gave her his name. That night, after the children were asleep, she found him on the porch. The sky was a black velvet blanket punched through with stars. "You don't have to do all this," she said, her voice quiet in the dark. He didn't look at her, just kept his eyes on the horizon. "I know people in town will talk. They probably already are." "I don't care what they think," he said, simple as that. Her heart started beating a little faster. You don't know whose child this is." "I don't care whose baby it is," Monty said, his voice firm but quiet. He turned to look at her then, and his green eyes seemed to catch the starlight. "I want you." She stared at him, speechless. "And I want Lily," he added, his voice softer now. "And Levy. I want all of it." Delilah shook her head, feeling overwhelmed, a feeling she wasn't used to. "You can't mean that." "I do." He reached out and took her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, but his touch was warm. "Let me take care of you, Delilah. Let me stay." He stood up, still holding her hand, and gently pulled her to her feet. He turned toward the road, toward the faint lights of Rockwood a mile away. "What are you doing?" she whispered. He just looked at her, his eyes so steady, and said it again, plain as sunrise. "I want you." And then he kissed her, right there, not hidden in the dark, but facing the town. One hand at the small of her back, the other cradling her cheek like she wasn't broken, wasn't used up, wasn't a woman abandoned by the side of the road, like she was someone worth loving. For a second she froze, then she melted into him, into the impossible kindness of it all. She could almost hear the whispers starting up in town. And for the first time in her life, she didn't care. When he pulled back, he had a small smile on his face. "That all right?" She could only nod, tears brimming in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered, "that's all right." Montgomery James had kissed her, and in that moment, she had never felt more seen. But as he held her there on the porch, she noticed something. He wasn't looking at her anymore. His gaze had shifted, looking past her, over her shoulder, at the dark, empty road leading away from the cabin. And the smile was gone, replaced by a look she'd never seen on him before. A look of intense, cold focus, like a hawk spotting its prey from 1,000 feet up. It was the look of a hunter. The kiss lingered on her lips the next morning, a ghost of warmth in the cool air. But the memory of that look in his eyes lingered too, a cold little knot in her stomach. She saw him through the cracked window, kneeling by the fence line. He wasn't just tightening a loose post. He was driving a new one, thick and deep, into the hard earth. His movements were efficient, powerful. There was a precision to his work that seemed out of place. It wasn't the work of a simple drifter. She stepped outside. "You're going to wear yourself out on that fence," he grunted, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "A strong fence keeps things out," he said, not looking at her. "And it keeps things in." The words hung in the air between them. Later that day, she watched him with the children. He was teaching Levy how to read the ground. Not for fun, not like a game. He showed the boy how a broken twig, a scuffed patch of dirt, a turned-over leaf could tell you a story. Could tell you who had passed by, how fast they were moving, and how long ago. These weren't farmers' skills. They were something else entirely. She felt a prickle of unease. This man, Monty, he was a puzzle. Every kind act, every gentle word was a piece of it. But she was starting to feel like the pieces didn't fit together right. There was a shape emerging she didn't understand. That evening, a rider came up the road. It was the town sheriff, a portly man with a droopy mustache named Abernathy. He didn't get off his horse, just sat there, looking from Monty to Delilah and back again. "James," Abernathy said, his voice flat. It wasn't a greeting. "Sheriff?" Monty replied, his tone just as flat. He'd placed himself between the sheriff and the cabin, a living shield. "Heard you were still out here," Abernathy said, spitting a stream of tobacco juice into the dust. "Figured you'd have moved on by now." "I like the scenery," Monty said. His body was relaxed, but Delilah saw the tension in his shoulders. "Some folks get tired of the scenery," the sheriff said, his eyes hard. "Especially when the scenery starts looking back." He glanced at Delilah's belly, then quickly looked away. "Just a friendly warning, James. This place, it has a history. Best not to dig up what's buried." The sheriff tipped his hat, a gesture that held no warmth, and rode off. Delilah stared at Monty. "What was that about? What history?" Monty's jaw was tight. "Just town talk. Pay it no mind." But she knew he was lying. She couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't just a woman he'd found by the side of the road. She was a piece in a game she didn't know the rules to. And Monty wasn't just a kind stranger. He was a player, and he was playing for keeps. That night she couldn't sleep. The sheriff's words echoed in her head. Best not to dig up what's buried. She waited until she heard Monty's soft snores coming from the barn. Then, with a shaking hand, she lit a candle and went to his saddlebags, which he'd left on the porch. Her heart pounded against her ribs. This felt like a betrayal. But the not knowing was worse. She fumbled with the leather straps. Inside, beneath a spare shirt and a whetstone, her fingers brushed against something hard and flat. A book. No, a journal. She pulled it out. The leather was worn smooth. She opened it to a random page. The handwriting was neat, precise. It wasn't a journal of thoughts or feelings. It was a ledger. Dates, names of towns, expenses, and names of men. Beside each man's name was a number, a dollar amount. Her blood ran cold. She flipped through the pages, a gallery of ghost towns and forgotten names. Then she saw it, near the back, a recent entry, Rockwood. And beneath it, a name she knew, the name she refused to say, Silas Kane. Beside his name was a number so large it made her gasp, a fortune. But that wasn't the most chilling part. Tucked into the back of the ledger was a folded piece of paper, a wanted poster. The drawing was rough, the face shadowed by a low-brimmed hat. But the eyes, she'd know those eyes anywhere. The cruel curl of the lip. It was him, Silas, wanted for robbery, wanted for murder. And at the bottom of the poster, in bold letters, was a name. The name of the man hunting him. The man who had submitted the poster to the territorial marshals. Montgomery James. She dropped the ledger as if it had burned her. The sound echoed in the silent night. He wasn't a drifter. He wasn't a savior. He was a bounty hunter. And she wasn't a woman he was saving. She and her children, they were bait. Every kind word, every gentle touch, every fixed fence and patched roof. It was all a lie. A calculated part of his trap. The man sleeping in her barn wasn't there to protect her. He was there to wait for Silas to come back, and when he did, Monty was going to kill him. She stumbled back into the cabin, her mind reeling. She felt sick, betrayed. She had let this man into her life, into her children's lives. She had kissed him. She looked at Lily and Levy, sleeping peacefully on their pallets. She had led the wolf right to their door. No, he was the wolf. Her breath hitched. What was she going to do? Run? Where could she go? She had nothing, no one. She paced the small cabin, a caged animal. Every shadow seemed to mock her. Every creak of the floorboards was the sound of her own foolishness. She had to confront him. She had to know. She grabbed a heavy iron skillet from the hearth, her only weapon, and stormed out to the barn. The door creaked open. Monty was awake. He was sitting up in the hay, a pistol resting in his lap, gleaming in the moonlight. He wasn't surprised to see her. "You should have stayed inside, Delilah," he said, his voice quiet, but stripped of all its earlier kindness. It was flat. deadly. "You're a bounty hunter," she whispered, her voice shaking. The skillet felt heavy and useless in her hand. "I am," he said. No apology, no explanation. "Silas is worth $5,000, Monty finished for her. "And he's the man who killed my brother." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Your brother?" "His name was Jesse," Monty said, his voice tight with a grief that was still raw. "He was a deputy. Silas and his gang robbed a bank in Wichita. Jesse was on duty. They shot him down in the street." He looked at her, and for the first time she saw past the gentle stranger. She saw the years of pain, the burning need for revenge that had driven him across the country. "I've been tracking him for 2 years," he said. "Lost his trail outside of Waco. Then I heard a rumor. A man matching his description, who'd abandoned a woman and 2 children. A man who bragged about a stash of money he had hidden away." He stared at her, his green eyes boring into her. "He's not coming back for you, Delilah. He's coming back for the money he stole, the money that got my brother killed." Suddenly, it all clicked into place. The strange looks in town, the sheriff's warning. They all knew who Silas was. They were afraid of him, and now they were afraid of Monty. "You used us," she said, the words tasting like ash. "You used my children." "I came here to wait for him," Monty admitted, his voice rough. "But I didn't plan on you." He ran a hand over his face. "Things got complicated." "Complicated?" she spat. "You lied to me. You let me believe—" She couldn't finish. "Everything I did for you and the children, that was real," he said, his voice pleading, soft again. But she couldn't trust it anymore. Was this another trick? Another lie to keep his bait from running? "Silas knows this place is remote," Monty continued, his voice hardening again, all business. "He thinks you're alone and helpless. He'll come back thinking he can just walk in, take his money, and disappear. He's not expecting me." Delilah's blood ran cold. "The money? Where is it?" "You tell me," Monty said, his eyes narrowed. "He must have told you. Where did he hide it?" She shook her head, her mind racing. Silas had been secretive, always looking over his shoulder, but he had spent one whole night fixing the hearth, relaying the stones. He'd said it was drafty. "The hearth," she whispered. "Under the hearthstone." A grim smile touched Monty's lips. "Good." He stood up, the pistol never leaving his hand. "He'll come, Delilah. Soon. And when he does, you and the children need to be inside. You need to act normal. You need to play your part." Play her part. Like an actress in a play he had written. The kindness was a lie. The kiss was a lie. It was all a trap. And she was the cheese. But then she looked at him, at the raw pain in his eyes when he spoke of his brother. And she looked at her own sleeping children. Silas wasn't just a thief. He was a killer. And he had abandoned his own blood. He wouldn't hesitate to hurt them if they were in his way. She was caught between 2 dangerous men, one who wanted revenge and one who wanted gold, and she was standing right in the middle of their war. The next few days were a quiet, suffocating hell. Every sunrise felt like a judgment. Every sunset, a reprieve. Monty moved with a coiled energy, a predator waiting. He no longer fixed things, he fortified them. He hammered boards over the smaller window in the back of the cabin. He showed Delilah how to load and fire the pistol, his hands clinical and impersonal as they guided hers. The warmth was gone. He taught Lily and Levy a new game, a hiding game. He showed them a small, dark space under the floorboards, accessible through a loose plank in the corner. "If you ever hear me shout the word river," he told them, his voice serious, "you run here, you hide, and you don't make a sound until I come and get you. Understand?" Lily nodded, her eyes wide. Levy just stared, his little face pale. Delilah watched it all, her heart a cold stone in her chest. This was her life now, a waiting game for violence. She cooked meals that tasted like sawdust. She washed clothes that never felt clean. She looked at Monty, and she didn't see a protector. She saw an architect of death. One evening, he sat on the porch, cleaning his rifle, the setting sun glinting off the barrel. "You could leave," she said quietly. "Take the children and go. Head east." She looked at him. "Why are you telling me this? I thought we were your bait." He didn't look up from his work. "Because Silas won't let you go. If he comes back and you're gone, he'll hunt you. He can't risk you talking. You and the children. You're loose ends." He finally looked at her, his face grim. "You were never safe, Delilah. Not from the moment he left you here. The only chance you have is with me." Was it true, or was it another manipulation? She didn't know. She couldn't tell what was real and what was part of his plan. The line between the savior and the hunter had blurred until they were the same man. The night it happened, the air was still and heavy. The crickets were silent. It was a silence that screamed. Monty was on the porch, a shadow in the moonlight. He hadn't slept in days. Delilah was inside, her hand resting on her belly, where the baby was unnervingly still. Lily and Levy were asleep. Then she heard it. The same sound that had announced Monty's arrival. Hoofbeats. But this time it wasn't one horse. It was three. Monty melted back into the shadows of the cabin. He peered through a crack in the door. "It's him," he whispered. His voice was calm. Too calm. Delilah's heart hammered against her ribs. She crept to the window and looked out. Three riders sat on their horses at the edge of the yard. The man in the middle, even in the dim light, she knew him. Silas. He looked thinner, meaner. The easy charm he once had was gone, scraped away to reveal the predator beneath. "Delilah," he called out, his voice smooth as poison. "Honey, I'm back." Monty looked at her. "Stay calm. Do as I say." He wanted her to open the door, to greet him, to lure him in. She thought of her children. She thought of the baby inside her. She was not a piece in their game. She was a mother, and a mother protects her own. She took a deep breath. She could do this. She had to. She walked to the door, her hand shaking as she reached for the latch. "Silas," she called out, making her voice tremble. "It's me, darling," he said, swinging off his horse. The two men with him stayed mounted, their hands resting on their pistols. "Sorry I was gone so long. Had some business to take care of." He walked toward the porch, his spurs jingling a deathly rhythm in the dirt. He stepped into the light spilling from the doorway. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Those eyes were scanning the cabin, looking past her. "You miss me?" he asked. "Where have you been?" she asked, playing the part of the worried woman. "Doesn't matter. I'm here now." He pushed past her into the cabin. His gaze went straight to the hearth. "Came back for what's mine." He knelt down, pulling a knife from his belt. He started working on the edge of the large, flat hearthstone. This was it. Monty was waiting in the shadows of the bedroom, rifle ready. But Silas wasn't stupid. He paused, knife in hand. "It's quiet in here. Too quiet." "Where are the kids?" "Asleep," Delilah said, her voice tight. Silas stood up slowly. He turned to her, his eyes narrowing. "You're not happy to see me, are you, Delilah? You look scared." He took a step closer, sniffing the air. "And I smell something else in here. Something that ain't you." His hand shot out and grabbed her arm, his fingers biting into her flesh. "Who's here?" he hissed. And just then, Levy coughed in his sleep, a small sleepy sound from the corner where the children's pallets were. Silas's head snapped toward the sound. A cruel smile spread across his face. "Well, well, leverage." He started toward the children. Delilah screamed, "No!" That's when Monty stepped out of the bedroom, rifle leveled. "Let her go, Kane." Silas froze. He slowly turned, his eyes locking on Monty. He didn't look surprised. He looked amused. "James," Silas said, his voice dripping with venom, I should have known. Still chasing ghosts? The ghost of my brother says hello, Monty said, his voice cold as a grave. Silas laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. He still had his hand on Delilah's arm. He pulled her in front of him, a human shield. His other hand drew his pistol with blinding speed, pressing the cold barrel to her temple. Looks like you're in a tough spot, lawman, Silas sneered. You shoot me, you shoot her, and the baby. He grinned, his eyes full of black ice. You always did have a soft spot for charity cases. Monty's face was a mask of stone. His rifle didn't waver. The two men stood there, a tableau of hate and revenge, and Delilah was trapped in the middle. The two men with Silas had dismounted and were now flanking the cabin, their guns drawn. She was out of time. She looked from Silas's dead eyes to Monty's burning ones. She realized with a sudden, chilling clarity that they were the same. They were both killers. The only difference was the reason. She had to do something. She couldn't just be the prize, the victim. She remembered the rope Lily had braided, the thick, sturdy rope made from scraps of cloth. It was coiled by the door. She remembered the lessons Monty had given her, not just how to shoot, but how to think, how to see the whole board. The money's under the stone, Silas, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. Take it. Just let us go. Silas laughed. Oh, I'll take the money, but like your friend said, you're a loose end. He was going to kill them all. In that moment, something inside her shifted. The fear didn't vanish, but it crystallized into a cold, hard diamond of fury. She did the one thing he would never expect. She stomped down, hard, on his instep with her bare heel. He grunted in pain, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. It was all she needed. She twisted away from him, lunging for the fireplace, not for a weapon, for the kindling. She grabbed a handful of dry twigs and threw them onto the embers still glowing in the hearth. They caught instantly, a whoosh of flame erupting upwards. The sudden light and heat made Silas flinch back. "River!" she screamed at the top of her lungs. It was the signal. From the corner, Lily and Levy scrambled from their beds. They didn't hesitate. They scurried to the loose floorboard and disappeared into the darkness below, just as Monty had taught them. The distraction worked. For a split second, every eye in the room was on the fire or the fleeing children. The cabin exploded with the roar of Monty's rifle. The shot wasn't aimed at Silas. It was aimed at the oil lamp on the table. It shattered, plunging the room into darkness, save for the flickering light of the hearth. Silas fired blindly, the shot splintering the wall where Monty had been a second before. Delilah dropped to the floor, crawling away from the firefight. Another shot rang out from outside. One of Silas's men was shooting through the window. She had to end this. She crawled toward the door, her heart pounding. She grabbed the braided rope. It felt solid in her hands. She could hear grunts and the thud of bodies as Monty and Silas fought in the dark. She crept to the doorway. One of Silas's men was trying to get in, his silhouette framed against the moonlight. Her mind was strangely clear. She remembered the knots Monty had taught Lily. A slip knot. Easy to tie, and it only got tighter under pressure. With shaking fingers, she looped the rope around the door handle, then around the heavy iron stove nearby, pulling it tight. A makeshift lock. It wouldn't hold forever, but it would buy them time. She turned back to the fight. Monty and Silas were on the floor, two grappling shadows. A knife flashed in the firelight. Silas was stronger. He had Monty pinned, the knife raised high. Delilah didn't think. She grabbed the heaviest thing she could find, the iron skillet. She swung it with all the strength she had, all the fear, all the rage. It connected with the back of Silas's head with a sickening crack. He crumpled unconscious onto the floor. Monty shoved him off, gasping for air. He looked up at her, his face bruised in the firelight. There was a long gash on his arm. "It's not over," he rasped, getting to his feet. "His men!" As if on cue, the front door shuddered as one of the men threw his weight against it. The rope held, but the other man was coming around the back. "The floorboards!" Monty said, grabbing his rifle. "Get the children out through there. Run for the creek. Don't stop." "What about you?" she cried. "I'm going to finish this." He looked at her, and in his eyes she saw something beyond the bounty hunter, beyond the avenger. She saw the man who had kissed her on the porch. "Go, Delilah. Live." He turned to face the door, a grim soldier holding the line, but Delilah didn't run. She looked at the man on the floor, the man who had caused all this pain. She looked at Monty, the man who had brought the war to her doorstep, but was now willing to die to let them escape it, and she made a choice. She grabbed the second pistol Monty had left on the bed. She checked the load, just as he'd shown her. Her hands were steady now. "No," she said, her voice ringing with a strength she never knew she possessed. "This is my home. This is my family. We're not running anymore." Monty stared at her, a look of disbelief on his face. The back door burst open. The second outlaw stood there, pistol raised. But Delilah was faster. She fired. The sound was deafening in the small cabin. The man staggered back, clutching his shoulder, and disappeared into the night. The pounding on the front door stopped. There was a shout, then the sound of hoofbeats fading into the distance. He was running, leaving his boss behind. Silence descended. It was over. Delilah stood there, the pistol still smoking in her hand, the smell of gunpowder sharp in the air. Monty walked over to her. He gently took the gun from her hand. He looked at her, at the fierce, unyielding woman standing before him, the woman who had just saved his life. He started, but he couldn't find the words. She reached up and touched the bleeding gash on his arm. "We need to bind that," she said, her voice soft now. The fire banked, but not extinguished. She pulled the children from their hiding place. They clung to her, shaking, but unharmed. They tied Silas up with his own ropes. He was alive, but he wouldn't be going anywhere. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gray, they sat on the porch. The broken door, the shattered lamp, the blood on the floor. It all seemed like a bad dream. Monty looked at the rising sun. "I have to take him in. The law will want him." Delilah nodded. "I know." He turned to her, his face etched with exhaustion and something else, something vulnerable. "Delilah, what I did, using you, there's no excuse for it." "You told me the truth," she said, "and you were right. We were never safe. You just showed us how to fight back." He looked down at his hands. "The bounty, it's a lot of money. Enough to buy this land, enough to build a real house." She met his gaze, her eyes clear. "Is that what you want, Monty? The money?" He looked at her, at Lily dozing in her lap, at Levy leaning against his leg. He looked at the wreck of a cabin that they had defended together. He walked over to where his saddlebags lay. He pulled out the wanted poster, the piece of paper that had started it all. He tore it into pieces. He let the wind take them, scattering them like ashes across the yard. "The only thing I want," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "is already here." Years passed. The land, once dry and unforgiving, softened under their care. They planted apple trees on the rise where the morning sun hit just right. They built a new room onto the cabin, and then another. Monty replaced the old porch with a wide one that wrapped around the front, with a swing he carved himself. The town of Rockwood, which had once watched them with suspicion, now saw them with respect. They weren't the abandoned woman and the mysterious stranger anymore. They were the James family. Lily grew up with her mother's spine and Monty's steady eyes. Levy, the quiet boy, grew tall and strong, his silence becoming a thoughtful strength. And Sarah, the baby born in the shadow of violence, grew up in a house filled with light and laughter, never knowing the darkness that had preceded her birth. Monty never hunted another man. The part of him that was driven by revenge had died in the cabin that night, replaced by something better. Delilah taught all three of her children to read and write, using a small slate she'd kept from her past life, a life that felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. One evening, as the sun set, painting the hills in strokes of orange and purple, Delilah and Monty sat on the porch swing, watching their grandchildren chase fireflies in the yard. Her hair was streaked with silver now, and his hands were gnarled with arthritis, but they still fit together perfectly. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked quietly. He was silent for a long moment, watching the children. "Sometimes," he said. "I think about the man I was when I rode up to this cabin, a man following a ghost." He turned to her, his green eyes still clear, still full of a love that had been tested by fire and blood. "And then I met you," he said, his voice a low rumble. "And you showed me how to live again." She leaned her head on his shoulder, the familiar weight a comfort she would never take for granted. They had built this, not with money, not with revenge, but with courage and a stubborn refusal to be broken. They had taken a place of fear and secrets and turned it into a home, a sanctuary. Their life was a quiet testament to the idea that sometimes the most beautiful things aren't found. They're forged, in the darkest nights, in the heart of the fire. The story of the bounty hunter and the abandoned woman became a quiet legend in that small corner of the world. A reminder that true justice isn't always about catching the bad guy. Sometimes it's about building something good in the space they leave behind. If you enjoyed this story, and you believe that the strongest families are the ones we choose to build, don't forget to like and subscribe. You never know what other secrets are buried out there, waiting for the right person to dig them up.